How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today's video we're focused on the What console stream, what happened in it, what the intel is for the next couple of months on World of Tanks console, what's going to be coming before summer, what's coming after summer, what's coming during summer, you know, looking at all of the information that we've been given by Wargaming. Not that there's that much, and there certainly wasn't that many screenshots or anything of that that will be coming into the game. Kind of a bit of a disappointment in my personal opinion, but obviously you can make your own mind up. I'd love to hear that in the comment section down below. We'll have a bit of a discussion and hopefully as a community come up with some ideas to give back to Wargaming. Hopefully they see this video, hopefully they look at the comments, see what people are believing and feeling about this whole thing, and then maybe they'll take some sort of route from that. Not saying that they will, but hopefully, fingers crossed, and that's all we can do kind of with Wargaming in control. Hopefully we can move forward with a positive attitude. Personally, I feel like it was a little bit of a letdown, the stream, in terms of what we were given. There wasn't that much screenshots. There really wasn't that much in the stream other than them just talking for 20 minutes. But I guess we were given some information, and obviously this video will look over that in just a second. I will make sure to segment this video, so if you want to go to a specific part, I'll have all of the titles and stuff linked out as to what part of the video talks about what my opinion is, that you can actually click on the YouTube video to go to a specific area. So if you want to reference anything, obviously you can use that as a guide, and maybe in the comment section down below just drop the title of the section that you're talking about and then give your opinion like that. So I think the first thing we have to talk about with regards to this new update or intel, or this big massive thing that Wargaming have been spending their time on in terms of development and understanding, is basically a new game mode that's coming into the game very soon. They said that in the later half of April that there will be this big update coming to the game. That was confirmed by Minto. There'll also be a few more update streams where they'll go over what the content is, but I feel like it's dragged out. It could have been condensed. But this whole new game mode focuses on a different era of tanks. So instead of it being World War II, they'll also have more modern era tanks. So, you know, you're looking from the Cold War onwards, from the 1980s plus. There's various different ways that they're going to be looking at this. I think that in the long run it's actually good to have more diversification in terms of the tank lines that you have. I think that for the majority of players, you know, so long as it doesn't hinder the matchmaking too much to begin with. If half of the player base is split between the old mode and the new mode, it just makes the old mode kind of irrelevant. A lot of people are going to move to the new one. Obviously they've said that there's a few different things that are going to be supported in that new game mode. Whether people will like the new or the old mode, it kind of splits the player base, and what happens when you split the player base, the matchmaking gets impacted. There's going to be a lot longer times in terms of loading into the game. I think that they're going to have to manage that quite well. It could take you minutes now to be able to get into the game if they haven't correctly done it right, if they haven't managed how many players are going to be on at one time, and what this impact is going to be like when they submit it to the live server or update the game itself. I think it's really crucial that they do testing before they implement this into the game as to how the matchmaking will work. Now, in terms of the next thing, they did say that the matchmaking will be era based. So if you're in a modern tank, you're not going to be fighting with World War II tanks like we have in the current game. So it will be era based. That means that if you're in a modern tank, you're going to be completely separate matchmaking. There will not be the choice for you to mix and match. I think that that's a good choice, but I also think it does impact the matchmaker in terms of a practical sense that we've obviously talked about, and I'm just hoping that that works well. Now, in terms of the eras, we don't know how many there will be, whether there'll be a Cold War era, a World War II era, and a modern era. There could be two different eras, so you know you've got plus like between 80s and 2000s, then maybe you've got 2000 to the recording of this video. So it's really debatable as to how that's going to work. I think they can only split the tanks into certain segments. I think if you make loads of different segments, the matchmaking is just going to be completely ruined, and I think in the past the matchmaking hasn't been the best thing about World of Tanks console for sure, and I think that that's going to be impacted, and I'm just hoping that what they do now will actually bring in more players, which means that the matchmaker will actually cope a little bit better with the new influx of players. Hopefully too many older, more veteran players don't see this as a complete change from their game that they're originally playing and they just leave. I think that's primarily happened already in terms of Update 6.0. A lot of old players have already left, but I think that the newer players will kind of accept this change. I think for those of the older players that have continued to play in the game, it might be a little test as to how they're feeling about the game. Maybe they'll leave, I'm not sure. I know personally I'm not, it's not going to impact the ability for me to play the game. I'm going to still play the game, I'm not going to lie. Like, it's just a case of how well it does and if I can actually play the game efficiently. If I'm going to have to wait 3 minutes every single time I load onto a game, and I'll just find something else to play that's more entertaining and doesn't have to waste so much of my time to load into the game for 3 minutes, play the game for 3 minutes, and then have to wait another half of the time to be able to get back into the game. Now, obviously we made a few videos about modern tank, looking at the M1 Abrams, the Leopard 2, we looked at the French modern tank, and we went over those, and you can see that there are definitely opportunities for them to go into the modern tanks, and I'm sure that that is what is coming in this game mode. There is eras. I think that will be the focus of what they're going to be developing now. I don't know if they'll continue to develop the old World War II. They are saying that will be part of the development. They're looking into the Italian heavy tanks. They have confirmed that the Italian heavy tanks are coming into the game. I did a video overviewing them, previewing them, whatever you want to call them, reviewing the tanks, telling you what the best things are, what they're good at, what you can expect when they come into the game. So if you want to have a look at that, I will link it on screen right now, so you'll be able to check that video out at the end of this one if you want to. But as for other tanks that they're looking at the French wheeled tanks. I know that they were a big controversial topic on PC, and I'm certainly a bit hesitant as to how they're going to be able to balance them on console. I hope that isn't part of the World War II. I think that it's going to really frustrate players, and I certainly think that one way of balancing the wheeled tanks is to actually make them a lot slower on grass and stuff like that. Make them maybe fast on hard terrain, but then make them absolutely slow, limit the speed on grass and stuff like that, and their turning speed, and make it so that they're a bit more dynamic, and it just stops them from just being able to pummel their way across the map continuously without stopping. I think that could potentially balance the tanks, but not also make them completely useless in the majority of situations. There wasn't much news with regards to the double-barreled Russian heavy tanks in the game. I don't know if that'll come or whether that'll just be shifted away into the background because it's a new mechanic that Wargaming don't want to spend time developing. I'm not entirely sure. I think that would be the line I'm most interested in personally, and I think that a lot of the community feel the same way. I think in terms of development, I would really pressure Wargaming to start looking into the double-barreled if they haven't already. I certainly think that most people would enjoy that more than developing another new modern tank that hasn't been developed on console yet. So I think that's important for Wargaming to decide and look into the future of the tank lines on the World War II version. I don't think that you should just move on to the modern ones and just completely give rise to just a modern game. Instead, I think you do have to keep the older players that have been playing the game. They originally came to your game to play the World War II tanks, so definitely don't leave that in the dust, because if you make a new game, completely disregard the old one, then I think it's really important that doesn't become the case, because if someone goes to play Call of Duty, they don't want to be playing Fortnite as the update develops. You go in to play a specific game. If it then turns into something completely different, obviously players are going to be like, well, I didn't sign up for this, why would I play it? Especially if they're a free player, you've got no hold over them. Like, they've spent money on the game to continue to play and feel bad about it, unless obviously they've spent money in terms of microtransactions. But we won't get into the whole microtransactions ramping up on console in this video. The new game mode will also feature larger maps, so this will be distinguished between the standard maps that were on the game as standard. They were 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters, so you had a huge area. But as part of this whole new game mode, they will be actually added into the game as with the new game mode, so all of the new tanks will play on these specific larger maps. I don't know whether that will be only for the larger maps or whether they'll also play on classic maps as well with regards to the modern era tanks and stuff like that. But I know that some of these larger maps will be available for classic, so that is the World War II era tanks that we currently have in game will have these new larger maps, but only specific tiers will have those maps for us to play. So instead of having them available to all tiers for the classic, it will only be certain tiers. I expect those tiers to be tier 9, tier 10, probably tier 8. I don't think that many of them are going to be below that, just because it will increase the amount of time that the games take. I don't know if the actual games will have more people in, so it might be 32 versus 32 on these larger maps. I don't know. Maybe it might be an increase to 20 versus 20. I don't know. Obviously the standard game mode has 15 versus 15. So this could also see a increase in the number of people in one game. I don't know how that will impact the matchmaker again, and I'm just hoping that they test this thing on the live server before they move on to full development and obviously bring it in for a long lasting time. I think that that needs to be focus of the game, and also have that opportunity to turn off this new mode until they kind of get that fixed. I don't think that they should rush this thing like they did with Update 6.0 when it first came in. Loads of bugs, loads of just actual blatant bugs that could have been sorted way before it was released, and should have been before it was released. You know, delay something if it's going to come in buggy, because it's only going to cause frustration. So I think that's something they need to be sure of. Make sure the maps are developed correctly. They need to be actually non-buggy. None of this floating objects that came into the game. Obviously, I'm not saying it has to be completely perfect, because to be able to develop a map that looks exactly perfect takes quite a long time. They're going to obviously have to check everything so much, and obviously when you're playing continuously with people continuously on them, people tend to spot them more than their tests can actually do. So I'm not expecting them to be absolutely flawless, but they should be nigh on perfect in terms of what they look like and how they play. No spawning in upside down, none of these kind of glitches where your screen's floating halfway in the middle of the map. I'm just hoping that they all are actually kind of perfect when they come in. As for some other information that Wargaming gave us as part of this, we found out that there will be a new vision system that comes into this game mode. In particular, it's not on the classic World War II that we currently play, so it will be only on that new separate game mode. But that is this terrible system that was tested on the live server for World War II. It was tested again. It was then tested again. I think there's been 3 tests where Wargaming have continuously been trying to push this true vision system that has been tested so many times. It's come back negative. No one wanted it in the current live game, and it's just been a bit of a back burner thing that Wargaming have been continuously trying to push. I think since they had to go into the development of this and really put some development into it to be able to make it effective, they're just trying to make what they've already done somewhat useful for the game, so that they haven't just wasted a load of money on development of something that no one wants. I don't think that that's a good way of being a business, to be honest with you. I don't think that you should, put something into a game just because you've spent money on it that is going to be sub-satisfactory to the players that are playing the game. It shouldn't be something that players don't want. I think that having this always rendering on of tanks, which means that wherever you are on the map, the enemy team can see you whether you're spotted or not. So it doesn't matter if you're actually detected or not. People can see you so long as they can see you in their vision. There will be really big problems with regards to people just being able to snipe you from the base, which is a really big problem. So they can actually just shoot you straight from the base, if they can actually get line of sight to you, which is just ridiculous. And I think that, it takes away a huge part of this game, which is the spotting mechanic. It just kind of renders it useless in terms of, you used to be able to, on the World War II mode, which you still can, is you can spot the opponents, which gets your team some advantage in terms of where they should be locating on the map, where the enemy team are locating themselves. Gives the ability for you to feel like you're rewarded for actually spotting in a light tank, and it just makes the game a bit of fun. You know, if you can use bush mechanics correctly, it's fun. A lot of the time now, I guess, bush mechanics and stuff like that have been kind of removed from the game, because if you can just see the tank over the bush, it's going to be pointless. Like a waffle sat in a bush where he might have been doing really well, you know, using the bush, pulling back from the bush. Now they can just be seen easily over the top of the bush because it is so large. And I just think that this whole system of true vision just doesn't work, in my opinion, and I think that they should just scrap the whole idea, put it in the bin, stop developing it, in my personal opinion. Obviously I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but being able to see the enemy team from the get-go, always rendering, doesn't mean that they're actually highlighted. It just means that you could actually see their tank as they're like driving through the map. So, you know, you could you could see someone, but they wouldn't necessarily have the little icon above their tank. So that is what it is, and I don't think that that's something that I'd want personally. Now, in terms of what extras they've brought in to be able to kind of counter that, they've brought in smokescreen consumables. So as part of that, that'll mean that there will be these smokescreen stuff. I think that that's what one of the teaser pictures was. It was actually a smoke launcher that is on an M1 Abrams or something very similar. There was an actual teaser for that. So whether they didn't actually directly link the teasers to specific things, so I thought that it was a bit stupid in terms of the way that they did it. I would have liked to seen that actually shown on the screen on the actual stream, to say, look, this is what the teaser was, this is what it means for the future in the game. Now, how will that work? Obviously, if you have the always rendering on, that'll mean that you can pop a smoke screen so people can't actually see you if you're going across a certain part of the map. Could be useful. Brings a whole new system into the game in terms of, like, that'll mean that you can pop a smoke screen, move around the map, use your ideas of going one way so that the enemy thinks that you're going a specific way and then going another way. You know, brings in mind games into the game, I guess. So I guess that's the way for spotting, the replacement for kind of being an actual spotting tank in the game. So I'd like to see what kind of that impact has on the game, but I certainly don't like the idea of true vision from the tests that they've continuously done on the live server of the current game that we can play right now. Another thing I want to make you aware of is that there will be new consumables that are exclusive to the upcoming game mode. That means that there will be smoke screens, will be a consumable, so you can pop it, you can then move around the map behind the smoke screen, making it hard for the opponents to see you. And there will also be hole patch kits. So I'm guessing what that will be is when you get damage, you can press the consumable, it will repair some of the damage, and also give you minor restoration of vehicle health over time. So you can pop the consumable, it will then re-health you on the game. I think that is kind of a bit bad, because in my personal opinion, what that will do for the actual game is, you know, you take a few hits at the start of the game. What are you going to do? I've just been hit loads. Right, I'm going to use my reusable minor health restoration of vehicle health over time by camping at the back, where I'm never ever going to get hit for the rest of the game, so I can recover back all of the health that I lost at the beginning. It just promotes this whole camping aspect. Whether they are going to be reusable, I'm not entirely sure, but I certainly don't like the idea of being able to restore some of your health. I think the whole aspect of World of Tanks is that, you know, it is kind of like a search and destroy. Once you take damage, that is it. You don't then be able to reuse your tank's health. It should be, you know, you get hit, you took that mistake, you made a mistake, you shouldn't then get the ability to hinder the amount of damage that someone else has just dealt to you. I don't think that that's a good idea, and I certainly don't like the idea of that. I like the idea of more consumables and having more diverse consumables, but they have to be very careful with what they're actually adding into the game and how that will impact the actual gameplay. Because if everyone's just going to be using smoke screens, camping at the back, using minor restoration of vehicle health over time after they've been hit, then what is the point in trying to advance and playing aggressively? It's going to lead to a lot of camping, and I certainly don't like the idea of that in terms of the gameplay, but obviously we don't know exactly how that's going to play. It could be completely different as to how the game balance actually is in game, so I'm hoping that what does happen is that it isn't just very campy in terms of the playstyle that everyone chooses to take. Adding to the fear of this camping meta that's going to be coming in on this new game mode is the no artillery in the game. What that means is that there won't be any artillery. I don't mean any. There will literally be removed artillery on this whole new game mode. They'll continue to support players who've invested in artillery in Wot Classic, so the World War II, but in terms of the new game mode there will be no artillery. So for those of you that absolutely despise artillery, this might be a really good positive change for you. But personally, when they're combining this with the fact you can have smoke screens where people aren't going to be detecting you, where you can just have minor restoration of vehicle health over time, it's just going to make this game feel a little bit campy. In my personal opinion, that could change. I'd like to hear what you guys think with all of those additions into the game, and also this new vision system. I think that that's going to be a key point of what everyone's thinking about. I think what the development team need to understand is that if the community don't actually like the system that you've incorporated onto the live server as part of tests, then I don't think that you should be developing it for this new game mode if you want the continual player base that are currently playing a game to move on to that new game mode. Whether the actual new game mode will attract players from outside of the current game and therefore increase the matchmaking potential, I'm not entirely sure that that will happen to a significant degree to warrant losing some players from introducing this change. It's going to happen. People are going to leave. People aren't going to be happy with this. People aren't going to like the idea that the game that they came to play is now being developed into something that is completely different, and they're going to be annoyed. I mean, understandably. Personally, I'm going to still play this game. I'm not going to quit completely, but if this continues where it's just development of whatever the devs choose, then I may be moving on to different games like the PC version. I know a lot of players have already moved on to Wot PC. I know that there's been a lot of new players coming into console. I'll continue to do videos on the news and give my opinions and tell you about what's good about the game, give you some guides and stuff like that, especially for the new game mode. But I do think that it is important that Wargaming don't naff the players off too much where they just leave, because if you're invested into the game with thousands of pounds, obviously it gives you incentive to stay. But for a lot of the new players, if they're playing this game mode getting wrecked, or it's just campy and it's not fun, then they're just going to leave because they haven't invested much money into the game, and that is the key aspect that the devs need to realise. And also not putting it completely on the devs, because remember, there are corporate chains to the company. It's going to be a lot of the corporate guys that are going, right, how much money can we make out of this? I'm not going to lie. Can we farm the new players by, getting rid of some of the old players that have played the game? They've already bought whatever we've introduced. We don't really need them anymore. They've got less of a ability to purchase more stuff because they've already bought it. So, if we do something bad, they leave, but we get a similar level of people coming into the game that are fresh players that have never bought anything, that have the opportunity to buy more. Then obviously they're going to choose the new players, get rid of the old players, and that's going to be a real problem in terms of the longevity of the game, because if those new players buy something, they leave the game, then you just have to keep that new players constantly coming into the game, which doesn't tend to happen when the actual gameplay is bad. So it's got to be a fine balance between those two things, and I think the way that they're going is actually disregarding some of the veteran players and just bringing in new players into the game. It's kind of one of those, like, this is what we're doing. If the old players don't like it, you can leave. If you do like it, stay. Brilliant, fantastic. But I'm not entirely sure. Personally, I don't enjoy that sort of aspect of a company in terms of the games. I mean, it is what most games companies do now. It's not a hidden thing that only Wargaming do. Let's not confuse anyone about that. Obviously, it's a company at the end of the day. If they're going to make more money by doing one thing, they're going to do it. They're not here to give you the best tanks game in the world. They're only here to give you the best tanks game if it makes them more money. So, you know, that's what's key for everyone to realise. I think a lot of people take personal emotions into it. You know, I really want this, I really want that. This is how it should be done if you wanted the best tank game. But overall, it is a company. They're going to do what's best for their bank account, and if that means that some of the old players have to leave, that is what they're going to do. I'm not justifying wargaming at all. I don't like it personally, the way that some of their decision making have been done. I believe that the update 6.0 that actually entered the game in December was actually forced by the corporate ladders, you know, the people at the top of the company who are saying like, are we going to make more money by doing this? We've given you a deadline of complete this by December. You've got to release it no matter what. We've already got some sponsors for the next season, which needs to be implemented straight away. So whatever the game is like, it has to be implemented. And obviously that's probably why we ended up with a lot of problems with bugs and bad gameplay and stuff like that. And a lot of negative feedback from the player base, obviously. Because if you implement a huge update and it's just buggy as hell, it's got loads of problems with it, then obviously people are going to have backlash. Would it have been better to wait like a month and actually get those bug fixes all done before they entered the game? 100%. I don't get why they had to kind of force that into the game at a level where it just wasn't optimal or even kind of beta worthy, to be honest with you. Now, this video wasn't to just completely trash wargaming. I don't think I've even really done that, but I am trying to be critical because it does need to happen sometimes. You know, there's enough kind of fanning around with some of these things, and sometimes you do need to have to give your full opinion on some of the changes that come into the game, and I think that that's important for me to do in terms of the new players and also the old players. I need to voice your guys' opinions, and that is what kind of makes me do these videos. I want them to be reflective of what people feel. I do like giving an idea of, you know, if you're a new player, it's probably going to be like this. If you're an old player, it's probably going to be like this for you in terms of what you're going to feel like. And I think it's good to get an overall opinion of what the community are going to feel. I think that this is kind of a good change, but they do have to make sure that what they are doing will actually be useful for the players that play this game currently, because that's the key thing I've got a bit of a problem with right now. Looking at what's coming in, I think that the balance changes are going to be really hard. I think there's going to be a lot of camping. I think that there's going to be a lot of disregard for some of the old styles of gameplay, so it's going to be everyone learning a whole new kind of way to play the game. And I certainly think that it will draw in players from potentially Blitz and also the PC version to try out the modern tanks on the game they know as World of Tanks. I don't think that the smoke screens and stuff like that, I think it would have been better to actually just implement a whole new era of tanks as part of a separate game mode. Don't change any of the core mechanics of the game, because that is what people play World of Tanks for. That's why people come to the game. They're not in it for some new vision system. They're not in it for new consumables which give you a smoke screen and stuff like that, because they've tested all of this stuff on the PC version. You see the reception from that has been negative, and I think that there's sometimes it just has to be known that sometimes what you're developing is just bad. And I think that there needs to be some sort of accountability for that. Say, look, we tried it, it didn't work. 70% of players didn't like it. 50% of players said, or at least 50% of players said, you know what, I don't mind it, but it's worse than the current one we have. Therefore, you know, 50% of players have said that they'd rather have the standard thing in the game. 20% of players have said they absolutely hate the new thing, and 30% of players have said, you know what, I could use this. And I think, you know, when you combine all of the things together, you've got a 70% of people who really don't want it in the game. I want to take the end of this video in order to talk about the future of World of Tanks console, what I believe will happen and what we can expect in terms of whether players are going to continue to play the game, because personally I'm feeling a little bit disappointed. I felt like the stream yesterday was a bit naff. I didn't think that there was enough kind of content there. There wasn't enough reassurance that what they're doing is actually going to be balanced. It just felt like a little bit of a kind of lackluster stream. I would have liked to see a little more delving into what the information that they're providing is actually about. There was only kind of highlighting what's coming. There wasn't really much intel, and considering they hyped it up as being a massive intel drop, I really didn't think that that was the case. I think players are going to be very hesitant as to this new game mode. I think that for a lot of players, Update 6.0 was big enough, and I think that the fact that they're moving into this new game mode, splitting the player base in half, or maybe even 80-20 onto this new game mode where they'll be playing the new game mode only, especially for some of the newer players, it's going to cause a lot of problems, and I think that it's got to be very, very, very carefully managed by Wargaming in order to not completely lose some of the veterans. I think personally, even me, I'm thinking that if this isn't done right, I might have to move on to the PC version. I've been planning on doing some PC content in the end anyway, but I certainly think that the console content, if it continues to be developed in a way that is just negatively received by the community, if they're continually developing systems that have been tested before in terms of the true vision, I think that it's not going to be good for the health of the game. And I think that if you focus on just a new player model, look at games like Fortnite, it continually developed, it grew massively because it had an influx of new players continuously because no one had ever played it before, and then as the time went on, players drop off because, they've invested into the game a little bit, they've put time into it, but after a period of time, once you've updated it like that, it's going to drop off. Like, you never can sustain this huge burst of people of just getting new players and new players and new players and new players that happen and play your game. So you do need to maintain your player base, and I think that if you continually do updates like this where you're relying on generating new players, it isn't sustainable, and I don't think for a long-term business model the World of Tanks console can keep doing that, because there is only so many people interested in tanks. A lot of people that have played console actually came from PC, where they wanted to try something different. If you're changing the core mechanics, I don't think that's a good idea, and I think that this new game mode might actually just end up failing, and you might even lose players that were actually playing the original game just because they don't like what you've done. So I think it's going to be important to balance that. I think it would have been better personally if I was developing it, obviously, with hindsight, with playing the game, and it's my own opinion, I would have just added modern tanks as a separate game mode, left all of the core game mechanics the same, maybe increase the map size like they have done, but definitely not messed around with the visions or true vision system that they're trying to implement, or messed around with some smoke screens, because I believe they may have even tested that on PC and it wasn't well received and stuff like that. I think messing around removing arty completely is not a good idea. I don't think that a lot of players are going to be happy about that. Any arty players are probably not going to play the game out of principle, or the game mode out of principle, meaning that there's going to be less players playing that game mode. I mean, for the initial bit of release, I hope they don't take the statistics as the initial release, because it is brand new, everyone's going to be testing it out, and then they go, look, our take-up rate of the new game mode is 95% of the player base. Obviously they want new content that was regarding the modern tanks. It's like, no, it's because it was brand new that no one's ever done on any World of Tanks console, PC or Blitz variant. Obviously people are going to test it out. Don't take the statistics from the first week, don't take it from the first month, take it from 3 months, 6 months down the line, and then you might actually get an accurate figure. Don't then say, we're going to be investing 95% of our time, because that statistic is wrong in terms of what development should be like in the long term. I think that that's something Wargaming need to be careful of, because in the past on PC and console they take these statistics and they roll with them from tests. They don't think about why that might be in terms of the actual release of something. It's like the HE changes that were on PC currently. They took a sample of what people had fed back to them in terms of whether they like the HE changes or not, and the people that are going to be playing that are probably players that have invested more time in the game, and you have to take a demographic check on the people that are testing your game. They're usually the players that play the game more, and that is something that Wargaming Console definitely need to figure out in terms of when they're taking their sampling data for the actual success of whatever they implement. Overall, don't get me wrong, I think that this could be a good change. Having the modern tanks is going to drive in a new audience. It's going to make those PC and Blitz players interested in how it develops and how it will be used on console. Maybe drive in some of those players from the different game modes to try out this mode. But personally, I don't know if that will happen. I think that the way that it will be implemented may be not quite right when it first gets introduced, which, over a period of time, the initial release of something is always the key part, whether people continue to stay. If it's bad when it first gets released, people don't then tend to check up on it after that if they think that the game is just not that good. So I'm really hoping that whatever they choose to do will be for future and future-proof it. Look at what the demographic of people that will come in is going to be like, and whether they'll actually stick around for the long game in terms of how the update comes in. Now, I could talk about this all day long, talk about what sort of things there can be, but I think right now I'd like to hear your opinions, and I'd like you to drop those in the comment section down below. Give me what sort of things you can expect or you're expecting from this update, what your plans are going to be for the future. Are you going to leave console after this update? Are you going to check out some other games, or are you just going to hope that it's good enough and continue playing, or are you just going to play the World War II version without any regard to the new one? Because I think personally I'm more interested in the World War II one because of the mechanics that they're going to be putting into the new one. I'd have been really interested in the new one if it was literally just the same exact game mechanics and core mechanics that were in the game as of the World War II, but unfortunately they haven't done that, and I don't think I'll be that interested in the playstyle that is going to be in that new game mode. Maybe they'll change it, maybe they'll tweak it, but I think in your initial release it should have probably been the exact same. Maybe then ask the community after that release whether they want the smoke screen, whether they want equipment that actually repairs the tank overall, and see what they think then. I don't think introducing it all as one was a very good idea, and I think that they'll probably see that in the data that they receive and the feedback that they get, so long as that they take the feedback from the people that actually play the game and not just a sample of people that are really dedicated to wargaming itself. Now, I want to say a massive thank you to those of you who made it to this point in the video and kind of took in some of the information that I gave, some of the opinions, and also to anyone that decided to comment in the comment section down below as for this video. It's really helpful in terms of getting the video attraction and also actually getting a good discussion for the community. I know that it's really interesting to see what you guys think, and I'm always interested in replying to the comments and getting an idea of what everyone's kind of ideas are about the new updates. I know that there's a lot of negatives that usually come in with updates, but sometimes it's nice to see what positives actually come out of them as well. I'm not saying that, I only look at positive comments, because it is interesting to actually see what you guys have to critique about the game. If it's just a complete comment about just being toxic, I don't tend to reply or do anything like that. But if it's actually an actual critique or anything like that of the videos or even the content on tanks, then it's always good for me to have a look at that and check out that in terms of what the future is for World of Tanks and what various different people think about that future for the game. Now, if you want to support the channel, you can do so by either liking this video, checking out some other content that will be on screen right now, and subscribing to the channel for more. Obviously, there will be some videos on screen, but you can also check them out via my actual channel page. I have community tab on there as well, which I tend to post polls to see what you guys are thinking of, to get a bit of interaction between you guys and have a bit more of a discussion apart from the videos that I make. And I hope that it comes across quite well for you, and it's interesting to see what other people have to say. Other than that, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I hope to see you in the next video. Goodbye.